But you never listen, he'd shout, the sound of his voice cutting through the walls, sharp and angry. I can't take it anymore, Carolina. This isn't what I signed up for. I would lie in bed, clutching my pillow, trying to drown out the noise, but it was impossible. I could feel the heaviness of their words in the pit of my stomach. It was as if their fights were pushing me further away from them both, and I was just a kid, powerless to do anything about it. When he left, it wasn't just him walking out the door, it felt like the whole foundation of our family had crumbled. My mom was left picking up the pieces, and we, the kids, had to grow up much too fast. Jamie, I know I messed up, my dad's voice brought me back to the present. But I'm here now. I want to make it right, if you'll let me. I looked at him, his weathered face, the man who had walked away without a second thought, and my emotions were a mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange feeling I couldn't quite place. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back. Another part wanted answers. The part of me that was still a child wanted him to tell me why he left, why he never looked back, and why he thought after all these years he had the right to show up at my door. Why should I let you in? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound composed. You left us, Dad. You abandoned us. You didn't even send a card on my birthday or call to check if we were okay. All those years you weren't here, you could have been. You could have tried. He looked down, his shoulders slumping again. I know, he said, his voice filled with a sincerity I wasn't sure I could believe. And I regret it every single day. But I'm trying now, Jamie. I want to be a part of your life again. After all this time? I shook my head in disbelief. You think we just pick up where we left off? You don't just get to walk back into our lives and act like everything's fine. It doesn't work like that. My mind raced back to all the moments I'd missed, family vacations, school events, moments of celebration, and even the quiet ones where we just sat together, a family, whole and intact. Those memories stung now, like ghosts I couldn't touch. He had missed all of them, and now he wanted to come back and act like we could just pick up where we left off. But we couldn't. Not after everything. Jamie, he said softly, I don't expect to fix everything in one day. I just want a chance to show you that I can be here now. For you, for your mom, for Stan and Juliet. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away, but I want to try. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back. But the other part, the part that had spent years wondering about him, about the man who was supposed to be my father, wanted to listen, wanted to hear him out, to finally understand why he left in the first place. You're right, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. You don't just walk back into our lives. You need to prove you're here for good. But right now, I'm not ready to forgive you. I can't just forget all the years you weren't here. You don't get to waltz back in and pretend nothing happened. He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret. I understand, he said quietly. I just want the chance to show you I'm sorry. I hesitated, my heart torn between anger and longing. After all these years, the one question I had was whether or not I could ever let him back into my life. But one thing was clear, I wasn't the same person I was back then. I'd built walls around myself, and they were strong. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness, maybe it was about closure. But for now, I couldn't open that door completely. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice steady, but my heart unsure. I'm not making promises, but I'll think about it. He nodded and turned to leave, but before he stepped off the porch, he stopped and looked back at me. Thank you, Jamie, he said quietly, his voice tinged with a sense of relief I didn't expect. Thank you for giving me a chance, even if it's just a small one. I watched him walk away, my hand still gripping the doorknob, wondering if this was the start of something new or just another chapter of unfinished business. He stepped back slightly, a flicker of something, regret, maybe, crossing his face. I understand, he said quietly. I didn't come to make things harder. I thought maybe you'd want to know I'm still around. That I never stopped thinking about you. About your brother. His words stirred something I didn't want to feel. For years, I'd built a wall so high that even his memory had trouble climbing it. And now, here he was, trying to scale it with nothing more than a tired voice and a hollow apology. Thinking about us wasn't enough, I said, my voice sharper now. You walked away. You left Mom to raise us alone. You left me to explain to a little boy why his dad didn't come back. He flinched at that, eyes dropping to the ground. I know, he murmured. And I'm sorry. I can't fix what I broke. I hoped maybe I could start trying. I shook my head, heart pounding. You don't get to just try now, like this is some casual fix. You were gone for 2 decades, and now you think you can show up and reconnect? I don't expect forgiveness, he said, raising his eyes to meet mine. I just wanted to see you. That's all. If this is goodbye again, I'll accept it. I stood there for another long moment, the silence between us stretched taut. Then I nodded once, slowly. I'm not saying I forgive you, I said. But maybe I'll think about talking. Someday. His eyes softened. That's more than I deserve. Then, without another word, he turned and walked down the steps, his shoulders hunched beneath the weight of everything unsaid. I watched him go until he disappeared into the dusk, and only then did I close the door. Not with finality, but with caution. Because maybe some doors don't have to stay shut forever. Just locked, until you're ready. He gave a slow, almost solemn nod, his gaze falling to the porch beneath his feet. I get it, he said quietly. I'll give you space. He turned away, taking a hesitant step back. But I'll be back in a few days. I hope you'll be ready to talk by then. I didn't say a word. Didn't nod. Didn't move. I just watched him walk down the steps and vanish into the night, leaving me rooted in the doorway, my thoughts tangled and my chest tight with a confusion I hadn't felt in years. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I reached for my phone, fingers trembling, and dialed my mom. I needed her voice. Something familiar. Something steady. She answered almost immediately. Jamie? What's going on? He was here, I said, the words spilling out before I could think. My dad. He just showed up at my house. There was a beat of silence on her end, and when she spoke again, her tone shifted, firmer now, sharper. He came here last week. I froze. Wait, what? Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to upset you, she said with a tired exhale. He said he wanted to talk, to make things right. I told him it was too late. And then? He left, she said, her voice softening. But Jamie, you have to remember something, he made his decision 2 decades ago when he walked out on us. You don't owe him anything. Don't let him rewrite that history. Don't let him make you feel like you're the one who has to forgive just because he's decided now is the time. Her words, meant to ground me, only stirred the storm more. He said he's coming back, I whispered. In a few days. Another sigh. This one deeper, heavier. Then be ready, but don't give him your heart just because he finally decided to show up. You've come too far to let him undo all of that. You hear me, Jamie? You're not that kid anymore. You're stronger now. And for the first time in that chaotic evening, I believed her. Maybe I really was. Yeah, I replied, my voice tight. He showed up at my place today. And Mom said he came to hers last week. I'm worried he's trying to see all of us now. There was a long silence on the other end before Juliet spoke again, her voice hesitant. Jamie, what does he want? Why now? I don't know, I said, pacing again, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. He says he wants to reconnect, but after everything, after 20 years of nothing. I just don't understand what he's really after. Juliet let out a soft, bitter laugh. Reconnect? That's rich. He walked out on us, Jamie. He abandoned all of us. And now he thinks he can just waltz back in and everything's fine? I know, I said, my stomach tightening. It's not that simple. But part of me wants to know why. What was going through his head all these years? Why come back now? I don't know, she said quietly. But I know one thing, Jamie. I don't think I can face him. I don't think I ever will. The anger's still there. I get it, I whispered, feeling the weight of her words. But he's already at Mom's and mine. I don't want him showing up at your place next. We need to be prepared for whatever he's going to do. I don't know if I can handle it, Juliet replied softly, her voice cracking just slightly. But I'll be ready if he comes. Stay strong, Jules, I said, my voice hardening, my own anger building again. This time, it's not about what he wants. It's about us and how we deal with him. Yeah, Juliet agreed, her voice steady now. You're right. We don't owe him anything. After hanging up with her, I sat down on the couch, the silence of the apartment feeling suffocating. I thought about the past, about the years my father had been absent. I had moved on, I had built a life without him. I didn't need him, not anymore. But that didn't stop the questions from lingering, from gnawing at me. Why was he coming back now? What had changed for him after all these years? My phone buzzed in my hand, and I glanced at the screen, another message from my mom. I almost didn't want to read it, afraid of what more she might say about my dad. But I knew I had to face it. Slowly, I opened the message. Jamie, I don't know what to do. I've told him we need time, but he's relentless. He says he regrets everything. I just don't know if I can trust him anymore. Please, talk to him. I think he needs you. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. My mother, still holding on to the hope of his return, asking me to help fix what was broken. But the damage was done. The years of abandonment, of silence, couldn't just be erased with a few words of regret. I had already faced the reality of my childhood without him, and I didn't want to go back to that place. I replied, I'll talk to him. But I'm not sure what will happen next. The message sent, and I sank back into the couch, my mind swirling with thoughts. I couldn't deny it, there was a part of me that wanted to face him, to get the answers I had never received. But another part of me, the part that had built walls to survive, wasn't ready to let those walls come down. The next day, I decided to take the first step. I had to confront him, to understand why he was here, and what he thought he could fix. But I knew, deep down, it was never going to be as simple as he thought. Reconnecting wasn't something that happened overnight. It was something earned, something that had to be rebuilt, and I wasn't sure I was ready to give him the chance. I closed my eyes, letting his words hang in the air as my mind wrestled with the idea. The thought of sitting across from our father, hearing his voice, watching him try to explain away 2 decades of absence, made my stomach turn. But then I heard the quiet desperation in Stan's voice, the same desperation I'd buried more times than I could count. He wasn't asking for reconciliation. He was asking for a chance to confront the ghost we'd all carried in silence. I don't know if I want to see him, I said finally, my voice low. But I get it. I get why you need to. And if you're going to do it, I won't let you do it alone. There was a long pause on the other end, then a quiet, thank you. We set the meeting for Sunday afternoon at a small coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral ground. As the day drew closer, my nerves frayed. I caught myself rehearsing what I might say, or imagining him sitting there, older, thinner, maybe trying too hard to look remorseful. When Sunday came, I got there early. Stan arrived a few minutes later, his hands jammed in his pockets, eyes darting around nervously. We sat at a table near the back, neither of us touching our coffee. The minutes ticked by. And then the bell over the door rang. He walked in slowly, scanning the cafe until he spotted us. Time had weathered him, deep lines around his mouth, gray at the temples, a kind of tiredness in his posture that hadn't been there before. He hesitated at the threshold, then started toward us. As he reached the table, He opened his mouth like he had something to say, but no words came. Just silence, awkward and heavy. Stan was the first to speak. "Hi, Dad." The man who had left us all those years ago gave a small nod, his voice finally finding him. "Hi. Thank you for coming." I stared at him, feeling nothing and everything at once. And just like that, the conversation began, not a healing, not a resolution, but the beginning of something raw, real, and long overdue. I shut my eyes, trying to quiet the chaos in my head. Stan's words lingered, pressing on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I didn't know if I had the strength, or the patience, to sit face to face with the man who had walked away from us without so much as a backward glance. But hearing Stan's voice crack under the pressure of hope and uncertainty made it that much harder to say no outright. "Let me think about it," I said eventually, my voice tight with emotion. "I'll call you back." "Okay," he replied, his voice quiet. "Thanks." I stared at my phone long after the call ended, torn in every direction, rage, guilt, and something even harder to admit, curiosity. Did I owe this to Stan, to myself, or was I just opening an old wound that never really healed? A few nights later, we gathered at Mom's house. The mood was tense, everyone carrying their own brand of emotional armor. Mom sat in her usual armchair, her posture composed but her eyes steeled. Juliet was curled up on the couch, arms crossed tight over her chest, her expression unreadable but her body language saying more than words ever could. Stan sat opposite her, hunched forward, wringing his hands like he could squeeze the anxiety right out of them. I stayed quiet, perched on the edge of the love seat, waiting, unsure what any of us were really hoping to get out of this. Stan cleared his throat. "I know this isn't easy, but I've thought about it a lot. And I really think we should meet him. Just once. Hear what he has to say." Mom shook her head slowly, her lips a thin line. "Stan, I know where you're coming from. But I can't. I made peace with his absence a long time ago. I don't need to invite him back in to reopen that chapter." Juliet let out a harsh breath, eyes flashing. "Mom's right." He walked out. He never looked back. Why does he get to come back now and pretend like we're all just waiting for his grand return? Stan straightened, the hurt visible in the tightness of his jaw. "Because I need to know, Juliet. I need to hear it from him. Why he left. Why we weren't worth sticking around for. Maybe you don't need that, but I do. Even if what he says is garbage, I just need to hear it." Mom sighed, her expression softening as she looked at him. "Stan, I get it. I really do. But you have to be prepared for the possibility that he won't give you closure. Some people, they never tell the truth. They don't explain. They just leave, and that's the only answer they'll ever give." The next few days felt like a weight pressing down on me, the upcoming meeting hanging over my head like a storm cloud. I kept thinking back to the past, to all the times my dad had been absent when we needed him most. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing by agreeing to meet him, but I promised myself that this wouldn't be about forgiving him. It would be about getting answers, hearing him out, and setting boundaries. Saturday afternoon arrived, and the tension in the air was thick as Stan and I drove to Brookside Park. I could see the uncertainty in Stan's eyes as he fiddled with his hands in his lap. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at him, forcing a half-smile. "I don't know, Stan. But we need to do this. For ourselves." I tried to sound confident, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what I was going to say when I saw him. My dad, the man who had walked out on us, the man who hadn't even looked back for 20 years, was still the same enigma he had always been. Could I trust anything he said now? When we arrived at the park, my heart was pounding in my chest. The weather was clear, the trees swaying gently in the wind, but everything felt off, out of place. We parked the car and walked towards the bench near the lake, just as we had agreed. I could see him waiting, sitting on the edge of the bench, his head bowed, as if he had been waiting forever. He looked smaller than I remembered, the lines on his face deeper, his posture slumped as if the weight of years had worn him down. As we approached, he looked up, his eyes locking with mine, a mixture of hope and guilt in his expression. "Jamie, Stan," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for meeting me." I stood there for a moment, staring at him. "Let's get this over with," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, despite the tightness in my chest. He nodded, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I know I've messed up, more than I can ever make up for. But I've been thinking about you all, about what I left behind, and I need you to know that it's haunted me. Every day." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I didn't leave because of you, Jamie. I didn't leave because of the kids. I left because I wasn't strong enough to handle it all. I couldn't handle your mom, the pressure of everything. I thought I was making the right choice for myself, but I was wrong. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pushed it down." "You weren't strong enough?" I repeated, my voice shaking with the force of my frustration. "You walked away, and we had to pick up the pieces. We were kids. We needed you, and you left us." He winced, his eyes dropping to the ground. "I know. I know I failed you. But I've spent years regretting it. It's been hard, more than you can imagine." Stan spoke up, his voice flat. "And now you want us to just forgive you? Just like that?" My dad looked at him, his face pale, and I could see the tears in his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if you can. But I needed to say this to you, to both of you. I know I don't deserve any of your time or your understanding, but I had to try. I owe you that much." I stood there, trying to process his words. This wasn't the reconciliation I had imagined, not the easy one where everything was magically forgiven and forgotten. This was real, raw, painful. It wasn't about closing the chapter, it was about facing it and acknowledging the hurt that had been left in its wake. "You're right," I said, my voice quieter now. "You don't deserve our forgiveness. But you do deserve to know that we're not just waiting for you to come back into our lives. We've moved on. We had to. And maybe that's the hardest part to admit." Stan didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension between us, the weight of his silence. For a long moment, we all just stood there, the air heavy with things unsaid. Finally, my dad stood up, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for my arm. "I'm sorry, Jamie. And I'm sorry, Stan. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make amends, even if it's just by being here, by saying these things." I met his gaze, my chest tight. "Just being here isn't enough. Not for me, not for Stan. We're not the same people anymore, Dad. And I don't know if I can ever be the person you want me to be in your life again." He nodded, his face a mixture of regret and understanding. "I know. I just needed you to hear me say it. I don't expect anything from you. I'll leave now." And with that, he turned and walked away, his steps slow and heavy, the distance between us growing with each step. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness wash over me. It was done. The questions, the anger, the unresolved feelings, all of it was out in the open now. And for the first time in years, I realized that I didn't need him to fix everything. I had done that myself. He gave me a quick, nervous smile. "Hey." "Hey," I replied, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than I needed to. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," he said, exhaling through his nose. "You?" I paused, then gave a small nod. "Let's get it over with." The drive to the park was quiet. Not tense, exactly, just filled with the kind of silence that says more than words could. I could tell Stan was deep in thought, probably going over every possible outcome in his head. I was doing the same. We were both bracing ourselves for a conversation that had been 2 decades in the making. We pulled into the parking lot at 1:43. He was already there, our dad. Sitting on a bench near the duck pond, hands clasped together, head down like he was praying or maybe trying to rehearse whatever he planned to say. Stan and I sat in the car for a minute, watching him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Fragile, even. And somehow that made it harder. Guess this is it, Stan muttered. Yeah, I said quietly. Let's go. We stepped out and walked together in silence, the crunch of gravel under our shoes the only sound between us. As we got closer, our dad looked up. His face lit up with a strange mix of hope and guilt, like he wasn't sure if he should smile or cry. Thank you, he said as we approached. Both of you. I didn't think you'd come. Stan sat down first, and I followed. I kept a few inches of space between us all, not because I was afraid, but because I needed boundaries, physical and emotional. Let's be clear, I said, echoing my words from earlier in the week. This isn't a second chance. This is one conversation. That's all. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Understood. He looked at us, really looked, and for the first time I saw it, the regret. It wasn't performative, and it wasn't polished. It was raw. And I hated that part of me still cared enough to notice. I know I don't deserve your time, he began, voice trembling. I know I left you with 1,000 questions and no answers. But I'm here now, because I owe you both the truth. No excuses. No justifications. Just the truth. I didn't say a word. Neither did Stan. We waited. And then he started talking. Hey, he called out, standing slowly as we drew near, like he wasn't sure whether to stay seated or brace for impact. Stan stiffened beside me, his steps faltering for a second before he caught himself. I felt it too, every cell in my body screaming for me to turn around and walk the other way. But instead, I took a steady breath and kept moving forward. Thanks for meeting me, our father said, voice gentle, too soft for the years that had passed without a word. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, with lines etched into his face that I didn't recognize. Time had weathered him, but it hadn't erased the damage he left behind. Stan didn't say anything. He stood just behind me, still clutching his coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I spoke first, because someone had to. We don't have much to say, but we're here. So talk. Our father nodded, swallowing hard. Fair enough. He looked between us, and for the briefest moment, guilt flashed across his features. I've been carrying this around for a long time. Regret. Shame. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it. Stan finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Why now? Why after all this time? Our dad took a step closer, then stopped himself. Because for years I told myself I wasn't wanted. That I'd already done too much damage. But then I realized maybe I was just afraid to face what I'd done. That doesn't make it right. But it's the truth. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I looked at Stan, his jaw clenched, eyes glistening, and I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. You don't get to just walk in and expect forgiveness, I said quietly. But we're here. Listening. That's more than you gave us when we needed you. He nodded, eyes downcast. I know. And I'll take whatever you're willing to give, conversation, anger, silence. I just didn't want to die without trying. Stan let out a slow breath, the fight in his posture easing just a fraction. Then talk. Say what you need to say. And we'll decide from there. So we sat. 3 people on a bench by the water, 1 trying to make amends, and 2 trying to figure out if that was even possible. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and difficult to breathe in. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or collapse from the weight of everything he was saying. Apologies and regret were fine, but they didn't change what had happened. They didn't change the pain we'd lived with for years, the years we had to carry the consequences of his absence on our shoulders. Stan sat there, his hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, I saw him as the little boy who had struggled to cope with the fallout from our dad's departure. It's not enough, Stan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. You can't just say sorry and think that fixes everything. I looked at my dad, trying to see him as a person who had made mistakes rather than the figure that had once towered over us, making promises he never kept. Sorry doesn't change the fact that we grew up without you, I said, my voice breaking. We weren't some lesson you needed to learn. We were your kids. And you just left. He nodded, his face crumpling with what seemed like genuine sorrow. I know, he whispered. And I've spent every day regretting it. But that doesn't change what I did. And I'm not asking for you to accept me back into your lives. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. There was a long silence, the kind that felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My heart was pounding, the anger and hurt mixing with something else, something I couldn't quite name. What do you expect from us now? I finally asked. Do you think we're just going to welcome you back with open arms? After everything? My dad looked at me, his eyes wide with the realization that his apology wasn't enough, that time couldn't undo the damage done. I don't expect that, he said quietly. I just wanted to tell you the truth. I just needed you to hear me say that I'm sorry. I stared at him for a moment, the words swirling in my mind, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Well, you've said it. And I guess that's all you can do. But that doesn't mean we're going to forget what you did. Stan stood up abruptly, his face hardening. I'm done here, he said. We've listened to your excuses, and that's all they are. I'm not ready to forgive you. Not now. Not ever. He turned to leave, and I followed suit, my heart heavy but resolute. As we walked away, I looked over my shoulder at the man who had once been our father, but who had been absent when we needed him most. For a moment, I wondered if there would ever be a way to reconcile the man he was with the father we needed him to be. But that was a question for another time. Right now, we had our own lives to live. Let's go home, Stan, I said quietly. And as we walked away from the park, I realized that sometimes, healing wasn't about reconciliation. It was about finding peace on your own terms. My dad bowed his head, his shoulders slumped forward like the weight of our words had finally broken through whatever hope he'd clung to. I know it's too late, he whispered. I needed you to hear it from me. Not in a letter. Not in some voicemail. From me. I needed to look you in the eyes and say it. Stan looked away, jaw clenched, staring out at the pond like if he focused hard enough, maybe he could disappear into the stillness. I stayed quiet, my throat tight, not because I didn't have anything to say, there were 100 things I wanted to scream, but because I was tired. Tired of carrying the pieces he left behind, tired of pretending I was okay with the silence he left in our lives. After a long pause, I stood. You said what you came here to say. I hope it gave you something, because it didn't give us much. Stan stood beside me, hands shoved in his pockets. He glanced down at our dad one last time. You're going to have to live with what you did. We've already had to. Our father didn't try to stop us. He just nodded again, slowly, as if he knew this was the only ending he'd get. His lips moved like he wanted to say something more, but the words never came. We walked away together, side by side, not speaking, but connected in a way we hadn't been in years. Maybe we didn't get closure, maybe there's no such thing when someone walks away and leaves a crater where a father should have been. But we had each other. And in a strange, quiet way, that felt like enough. As we reached the parking lot, Stan finally broke the silence. Thanks for coming. Thanks for asking, I replied, my voice low. I think I needed to hear it too, even if it didn't fix anything. We got into the car, and as I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror, just once. My dad was still sitting on that bench, alone, looking out over the water. I didn't feel anger in that moment. Just a deep, quiet sadness for what could have been, and what would never be. Dad, Stan said, his voice softer now, almost calm. I thought meeting you might bring some kind of closure. But honestly? I've realized I don't need anything from you anymore. That chapter closed a long time ago, whether you were ready for it or not. I glanced at our father. He looked so much smaller than I remembered, his back slightly hunched, his hands shaking in his lap, his eyes staring at the ground like they couldn't bear to meet ours. "I don't hate you," I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. "But you don't have a place in our lives anymore." "I'm sorry, but it's just too late." He opened his mouth, like he wanted to respond, to plead or explain, but no sound came out. After a few seconds that felt much longer, he gave a small nod, lowering his head further. "I understand," he whispered. Stan stood up without another word, and I followed. Together, we walked away from that park bench and the man who used to be our father. The drive back to Stan's apartment was wordless. There was no radio, no casual conversation, just the steady hum of the engine and the quiet weight of everything we had said. Stan stared out the passenger window, and I let him have that space. There wasn't anything left to say, not yet, anyway. When I finally pulled up in front of his building, Stan turned to me, his expression worn but honest. "Thanks for coming with me," he murmured. "I don't think I could have gone through that on my own." I gave him a small nod and a faint smile. We did what we needed to do. Now it's time to move on. He hesitated a moment before opening the door. "Take care of yourself, Jamie," he said, his eyes lingering on mine just a second longer than usual, and then he stepped out and closed the door behind him. As I drove home, the silence in the car still lingered, but it didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. It felt like a closing chapter, a final page turned. We had faced the past, not to fix it, but to leave it behind. It didn't feel like healing yet, but maybe this was the first step,